Chapter 5 Home of the Brave. It is time we finally have an honest national conversation about patriotism, the love of country. Waving a flag and belligerently chanting USA, USA, while turning a blind eye to suffering and injustice is a pretty pathetic definition of love to me. The outraged response to NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick's dignified 2016 protest, kneeling during the national anthem to call attention to the repeated slaughter of unarmed black people by police, is a case in point. A symbol, the national anthem, according to those so outraged, was being disrespected. So, where was the outrage at actual lives cut short? The families grieving, the communities living in perpetual fear of being murdered and harassed by police. Absent, apparently. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? When Francis Scott Key wrote those words, his question was whether the banner was waving. The banner is waving. Kaepernick raised a different question. Is this the land of the free for everyone? I would like to raise another question. Are we living up to the lofty claim of being the home of the brave? When did it become brave to shoot an unarmed person in the back? When did it become brave to tie someone up and then kneel on their neck until they suffocate? Doc Rivers, the black coach of the Los Angeles Clippers basketball team, expressed this with such poignancy after watching the recent GOP convention. What stands out to me is just watching the Republican convention, and they're spewing this fear. All you hear is Donald Trump and all of them talking about fear. We're the ones getting killed. We're the ones getting shot. We're the ones that we're denied to live in certain communities. We've been hung. We've been shot. And all you do is keep hearing about fear. Rivers compared the different reaction that black people demonstrating against police brutality receive to the response of police when white Trump supporters carrying guns entered the Michigan State House to protest public health measures ordered by that governor to stop the spread of COVID-19. It's funny. We protest. They send riot guards. They send people in riot outfits. They go up to Michigan with guns. They're spitting on cops. Nothing happens. Rivers spoke softly, but these words reverberated in my heart as if he had shouted. It's amazing why we keep loving this country, and this country does not love us back. Why must every political speech, regardless of party, contain the seemingly obligatory declaration that this is the greatest country in the world? Every time I hear them say that, I think of a TV commercial that aired when I was young, which had children singing, "My dog is better than your dog," to sell dog food made of horse meat. No one ever explains what the standards are for this claimed greatness. We're not supposed to ask what justifies this claim, just mindlessly agree. There is a popular grocery store chain here in New York that labels its store brands, just ordinary groceries, as food you feel good about. But I want food that actually is good, which is why I buy the food labeled organic. Organic food has a defined standard. A great country should have a defined standard too. How about this standard? Happiness. Living in that country is good for people who live there. As it turns out, there actually is something called the World Happiness Report. It is an annual publication of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network and contains ranking of national happiness based on GDP per capita, social support, healthy life expectancy, freedom to make life choices, generosity, and perceptions of corruption. Except for the GDP statistic, the ranking in the other categories are based on the respondents' perception of their own lives. Being the greatest country in the world isn't making us that happy. Finland is number one in happiness as of 2020, its third year in the top spot. Do you know where we are? Number 19, behind in order: Finland, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Netherlands, Switzerland, Sweden, New Zealand, Canada, Austria, Australia, Costa Rica, Israel, Luxembourg, United Kingdom, Ireland, Germany, and Belgium. The first category, GDP per capita, is not like the other categories, which are based on each individual's assessment of their actual experience as members of that society. They are telling researchers whether they feel supported, whether they think their government works in the people's interests, whether they feel free to pursue their dreams. In contrast, GDP per capita is an average of the total amount of economic activity divided by the population number. It is based on this GDP number that we also claim the title of the richest country in the world. But GDP per capita says nothing about how much wealth any individual has. It does not tell you that the four richest men in America have now amassed $542 billion in wealth. That's more than the bottom half of all Americans combined, according to Professor Robert Reich, a former Secretary of Labor. GDP measures the size of the total economy, the size of the pie, not how large any given person's slice is or whether they get a slice at all. So many in America sit at a needlessly meager table while others gorge and still have leftovers. 40% of the people in this country don't have an extra $400 in case of an emergency. The United States federal government shutdown of 2018 through 2019 lasted 35 days. Many of the furloughed federal workers and contractors did not have the funds for the next month's rent absent their paychecks, even though they are paid above minimum wage. That is because even when they are working, they can barely make ends meet. To anyone who has not suffered the problem of struggling to pay the bills each month, allow me to inform you that it does not make a person feel like they are free. It is an existence of constant anxiety. Stress literally makes people sick. The feeling of being in an inescapable trap leads to despair. In his speech, William Barr blamed the lack of religion for the opioid epidemic that has taken so many lives. He asserts religion is the answer. Opioids are painkillers. It is not lack of religion that is causing the pain. It is the policies that he and other conservatives espouse, so-called trickle-down economics, in which trickle is the operative word. None of that let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream for these guys. These policies have always caused suffering, or in any event failed to alleviate it. In every society where they hold sway, people hurt by them rise up in protest. You can stop the protests at gunpoint, but you can't make people happy at gunpoint. The bills arrive every month, whether you believe in God or not. Let's take a look at the religiosity of the top 5 happiest countries, all democracies: Finland, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Netherlands. Are they very religious, as William Barr's theory suggests a successful democracy should be? In every one of these countries, people are completely free to practice religion. Mostly they choose not to. Finland is officially a Christian country, but only 27% of the population says they believe in a Christian God, per a report in the Helsinki Times. Although 75% of Danes are registered members of the Evangelical Lutheran Church, less than a fifth of Danes see themselves as very religious. In Norway, only 19% of the population say religion is important in their lives, according to the Pew Research Center. Iceland is officially a Lutheran country. However, a 2016 poll in the tiny nation found 0 Icelanders under 25 who accept the creation story of the Bible. That's 0. 93.9% of Icelanders younger than 25 believed the world was created in the Big Bang. 6.1% either had no opinion or thought it had come into existence through some other means. And 0% believed that it had been created by God. In the Netherlands, 78% of the population over age 15 attended religious services seldom or never, according to a 2017 survey. By contrast, 53% of the US population said religion was important in their lives, according to Pew. Karl Marx said, "Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people." Religion, like opium, is a coping mechanism. Neither religion nor opium addresses the underlying cause of the distress. As the pandemic has made clear, the so called essential workers of this society are among the most poorly paid. Not only does their rotten pay cause them constant financial stress at the best of times, while those better paid work from home. According to Robert Reich, here is the annual income for some of these frontline workers. Nursing assistants, 34,000. Restaurant cooks, 27,000. Home health aides, 24,000. Cashiers, 22,000. And what Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos made in one day? 13 billion. Christopher Ingram, the Washington Post data reporter, provided the following information with respect to the profits Bezos has made during the COVID-19 pandemic, when many people switched to online shopping at Amazon for things they'd usually buy in person. If Jeff Bezos gave all 876,000 Amazon employees a $105,000 bonus, he'd be left with exactly as much money as he had at the start of the pandemic. As a society, we really haven't come to grips with the morality and ethics of allowing so much wealth to accumulate in so few hands. Like, we talk a lot about a person's right to accumulate $200 billion in personal wealth, but not about the civic responsibilities that might come with that. What does it mean when one person has the economic capacity to end homelessness or hunger for a decade or more? To some people, that discussion ends at, well, it's his money, he can do what he wants, and besides, it isn't liquid. But that feels like a cop out to me. Here's the truth about people, and it redounds to our credit. Most people value many more things in life far above money. They value the love of family and friends, the good opinion of their community, the feeling of having a life that makes a difference. There is a difference, however, between a modest lifestyle and not even having enough financial security for basic things. There is no glory in working 2 jobs. That people have to do this is a societal failure stemming from a moral failure. Adding insult to injury, these jobs are often emotionally unrewarding as well, or physically debilitating. It is one thing when everyone in a society is sacrificing for some common goal, such as occurs at a time of war. It is another thing entirely when some people are constantly asked to sacrifice, while others For example, on sale today at overstock.com, a Cartier's men's Rotonde de Cartier black leather watch, $410,885.99, had a savings of $60,600. There's another model on offer for $361,790.09, and another. Meanwhile, in the other America, people are being evicted from their homes, thrown out on the street, because those devotees of the free market in the U.S. Senate don't think the plebeian scum ought to have a $600 per week unemployment payment because it discourages those lazy fucks from working. To put this in perspective, it would take 13 years of those unemployment payments to buy that Rotonde de Cartier watch. I really would like my country to be the greatest in the world. To be a patriot, to love your country, is to demonstrate love toward its people. We know the people in our military love our country because they have stepped forward to risk even their lives to defend our common home. I believe we honor their sacrifice best by being a loving and honorable society worthy of that gift. Instead, we are a society controlled by people who venerate the right to own a $400,000 watch, but accord no right to the majority of people to live in dignity on their earnings. This worship of greed does not make a country great or happy. Let's look at those top 5 happiest countries again. I notice a few things right off the bat. All of these countries are small. None of them claim to be the leader of the free world or maintain military outposts all over the globe. None of them have great weather. These characteristics don't seem to be a requirement for happiness. All those countries have universal health care, unlike the US. No one has to worry about paying for treatment if they or a loved one become ill. In Finland, Denmark, Norway, and Iceland, the government subsidizes college. Money is not a barrier to learning, and young people don't start out in life with debt. One of the most important things in life is being able to spend your time doing things you enjoy. Let me ask the question this way. If you had enough money not to have to work, would you do the job you are now doing as a volunteer? If so, how many hours per week would you devote to it? In Finland and Denmark, employees get at least 5 weeks paid vacation, plus 11 public holidays by law. In Norway, it's 5 weeks vacation and 10 public holidays. In Iceland, 24 working days plus 14 public holidays. In Netherlands, it's 4 weeks paid vacation, no required pay on public holidays. In the US, the amount of required paid vacation is 0. All of those countries offer at least 4 months of paid parental leave. United States, 0. So much for family values. In a survey of 21,000 respondents in 80 countries, the US News and World Reports came up with a list of the top 10 countries to raise kids. The following 8 attributes were considered: care for human rights, family friendly, gender equality, happiness, income equality, level of safety, well developed public education system, and well developed healthcare system. In the top 10, Finland, Denmark, Norway, and the Netherlands. I don't know if they even considered Iceland. It's so small that it is often overlooked. The United States was not in the top 10. In a September 2020 article published in the New York Times by columnist Nicholas Kristof, he reports on the data from the 2020 edition of the Social Progress Index. Out of 163 countries assessed worldwide, the United States, Brazil, and Hungary are the only ones in which people are worse off than when the index began in 2011. And the declines in Brazil and Hungary were smaller than America's. And the index, inspired by research of Nobel winning economists, collects 50 metrics of well being: nutrition, safety, freedom, the environment, health, education, and more to measure the quality of life. Norway comes out on top in the 2020 edition, followed by Denmark, Finland, and New Zealand. Some familiar names in the top countries? Christoph continues. The United States, despite its immense wealth, military power, and cultural influence, ranks 28th, having slipped from 19th in 2011. The index now puts the United States behind significantly poorer countries, including Estonia, Czech Republic, Cyprus, and Greece. The United States ranks number 1 in the world in the quality of universities, but number 91 in access to quality basic education. The US leads the world in medical technology, yet we are number 97 in access to quality healthcare. The Social Progress Index finds that Americans have health statistics similar to those of people in Chile, Jordan, and Albania, while kids in the United States get an education roughly on par with what children get in Uzbekistan and Mongolia, Christoph's article said. This alone might explain why there are enough people sufficiently ignorant to support a lying psychopath like Donald Trump for president, and who are unable to discern that he is a con artist and that his policies are actually harming them. Shamefully, we rank 100th among the worst in the index for discrimination against minorities. Christoph cites David G. Blanchflower, a Dartmouth economist, whose new research shows that the share of Americans reporting feeling that every day is a bad mental health day has doubled over 25 years. Rising distress and despair are largely American phenomenon, not observed in other advanced countries, said Blanchflower. Christoph writes how deeply personal these statistics are to him. A quarter of the kids on my old number 6 school bus in rural Oregon are now dead from drugs, alcohol, and suicide, what are called deaths of despair. I lost one friend to a heroin overdose this spring and have had more friends incarcerated than I could possibly count. The problems are now self-replicating in the next generation because of the dysfunction in some homes. You, as taxpayers, paid huge sums to imprison my old friends. The money would have been far better invested in educating them, honing their job skills, or treating their addictions. Why do Americans put up with this? Erroneously continuing to chant, "We're number 1," as we sink deeper into misery? One answer is they have no idea that there are countries where people care little for guns or Bibles and experience a feeling of freedom and safety that only the wealthy experience here. More God and free market worship is not the answer. William Barr has no solution to the problem because he is a champion of the ideologies and policies that have caused it. The religious conservatism that Barr defends has no relationship to democracy or liberty, but as its antagonist. It is monarchical, teaching unquestioning submission to authority, turning its followers into perpetual children, frightened of the wrong things. As an atheist recently quipped on social media, why is it that religious people get possessed by demons, but atheists never do? Why are people carrying guns to the grocery store instead of asking why the food prices keep going up when their incomes don't? Personal responsibility means nothing without personal power. People who have the power aren't taking responsibility. They're shopping for $400,000 wristwatches and dumping pollution in our air and water. We, the people of New York State, fought a long but ultimately victorious battle to ban fracking before it started. We saw what happened to our neighbors in Pennsylvania. This is extremely personal for me. The heartbreakingly beautiful place I live was slated to be turned into an industrial sacrifice zone. It took tens of thousands of people using every avenue from protest to legislation to lawsuits to stop it. All of us volunteers, arrayed against an enemy drawing hefty salaries every day for their efforts to destroy us. Our enemies were cut from the same cloth as Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of ExxonMobil, later Trump's first Secretary of State. Rex and I apparently have one thing in common. We love horses. When energy companies wanted to frack near Tillerson's Texas horse ranch, he got hot under the collar because the effect it would have on his horses. Fracking sickens animals and people. We might be nobodies here in rural New York, but we love our horses just as much. We're talking about being the home of the brave, right? The people packing ARs at Waffle House, screaming about alpha males and cucks and snowflakes, don't look so brave to me. They live in fear of stupid things like not being man enough or people eating tofu. They live in fear of a black person walking through their segregated and often gated neighborhood. The rich ones are the most fearful of all. They have the most victims, and they fear those victims might come one day seeking vengeance. That's what the cops are for their own thin blue line against the kind of justice God might dish out if he existed and were just. They know because their very own Savior said it. I tell you the truth. It is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Right about now, I'd say that radical left Antifa anarchist atheists are looking like better Christians than William Barr. Seth Andrews is the host of the Thinking Atheist podcast. He was raised in a Christian fundamentalist family in Oklahoma. Until he was in the third grade, he attended public school. When he came home one day, brimming with excitement at learning about Neanderthals, his parents yanked him out of that school and sent him to a Christian school where he would not be taught anything that would challenge his parents' biblical literalist belief. It was only a matter of time until the curious boy might ask, Mommy, where does it talk about Neanderthals in the Bible? I have referred to the fundamentalists as religious medievalists, but that's not fair to medieval people who literally had no access to knowledge. Even in the Dark Ages, as that time is called because of the domination of the church over intellectual life, people searched for answers to questions great and small. The fundamentalists of the 21st century have at their fingertips all of the understanding that humanity has amassed. Yet they deliberately strive to build themselves a wall of Bibles to keep it at bay. As an atheist, I am baffled by that kind of fear. Though I understand the issue behind their obsession, given how they, like William Barr, think heeding the commandments of God are all that prevents humans from behaving like animals. I put this in scare quotes because every animal I've ever met is more honest than William Barr. Once you admit that the Garden of Eden is a parable and that Noah's Ark is a legend, where does it stop? Pretty soon the question will arise as to whether Jesus actually rose from the dead, and poof, the whole thing falls apart. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. That is the promise of religion: safety, protection, freedom from fear. Yet it apparently fails to deliver. Seth Andrews had reached middle age before he lost his belief in God. He has said that during the time he was a devout Christian and he was sure he was going to heaven, he nevertheless feared death. When he became an atheist, the fear went away. Religion doesn't solve fear, it creates fear, then claims to have the solution, just like authoritarian leaders do. In a 2018 article in The Atlantic titled, Evangelical Fear Elected Trump, John Fay wrote, white conservative evangelicals in America are anxious people. I know because I am one. Our sense of fear, perhaps more than any other factor, explains why evangelicals voted in such large numbers for Donald Trump in 2016 and continue to support his presidency. Fay wrote, working with horses has taught me more about people than working with people ever did. Horses are people minus the words that cause such confusion. They show you who they are. Every horse person knows that it is the frightened horses, not the confident ones, that are most likely to hurt you. They are mistrustful, quick to react, to lash out at imagined threats. Only love and patience can lessen their fear. Even after years, though, the triggers left by abuse remain. This damage can't be unmade. But they are horses, and no one is obliged to have to deal with them if they choose not to. It is quite another thing when it is people who have been physically and mentally abused by toxic indoctrination, who live near you, march around with weapons, and vote governments into office. You can't kill the truth with a gun, but you can kill the people who tell it. They can't make people believe in their God at gunpoint, but they can kill those of us who refuse to pay lip service. An ex Mormon describes her former faith as totalitarian religion. Submit, surrender to a higher power. Think what they tell you to think. Live how they tell you to live. Indoctrination into totalitarian religion prepares a person to accept totalitarian government. Men hungry for power like William Barr love the credulity and obedience that religion teaches. They have used it to advantage throughout human history. I admit that I used to assume that the devotees of totalitarian religion were unintelligent. I have since listened to thousands of hours of testimonies by ex believers of these faiths. None of them are stupid, and many are brilliant. It was not stupidity that ensnared these caring, decent people in lies. It was social pressure, the need to belong that kept them in these faiths, that made them vigorously suppress their own doubts in order to continue to belong. Their own inner voices that raised these doubts terrified them. Sometimes their internal struggles lasted for years. There is something in all their testimonies that reminded me of substance addiction. Addictions are hard to break because they fill a hole inside you. And facing life without the thing to which one is addicted feels impossible, even if you know the addiction is hurting you. I can understand addiction. I just can't fathom religion as the drug of choice. When I realized there was no God, I felt relieved. It meant that the evil in the world was not caused by an all powerful supernatural being whose personality strangely resembles Donald Trump. Therefore, we could stop it. I also assumed that the culture war was a creation of the right wing talk show circuit. As it turns out, this has been going on since the nation's founding. Fay wrote, at the turn of the 19th century, evangelicals went to war against unbelievers, deists, skeptics, freethinkers, and other assorted heretics who threatened the godly character of the Republic. Elias Boudinot, a former president of the Continental Congress, agonized that unless he and his team of evangelical federalists curbed the influence of the followers of Thomas Paine, the United States would end up like the Church of Laodicea in the book of Revelation. Because you are lukewarm in your faith, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. Jedediah Morse, a Massachusetts minister and author of geography textbooks, worried that the Bavarian Illuminati, a German anti Christian secret society, had infiltrated America to abjure Christianity, justify suicide, advocate sensual pleasures agreeable to Epicurean philosophy, decry marriage, and advocate a promiscuous intercourse among the sexes. When godless Thomas Jefferson was elected president of the United States in 1800, frightened New England evangelicals thought the Virginians' henchmen would soon be arriving in their towns and homes on a mission to take away their Bibles. Change the names and dates, and this could be a story in today's political news. I'm not in the habit of citing the views of America's founders in political debate because I don't find them relevant. The whole purpose of government by the people is for the people who have to live under that government to shape it in such a way as to promote their well being. The right, however, loves citing the founders, especially when making their argument that our country was founded as a Christian nation. Even if that were true, I don't care. Neither do people in those happy Scandinavian countries which actually have official Christian churches, whose doctrines the people ignore as they enjoy their long, government mandated paid vacations. I am interested in the truth, though. Since William Barr has made that argument, I'll see his John Adams and raise him one Thomas Paine. It was Adams who said, without the pen of the author of Common Sense, the sword of Washington would have been raised in vain. Paine was not an atheist in that he did not reject the existence of a supreme being. He was a follower of deism, an intellectual movement of the 17th and 18th centuries that accepted the existence of a creator on the basis of reason, but rejected the belief in a supernatural deity who interacts with humankind. Deists drew their moral guidance from the idea of a natural religion that is inborn in every person, or that can be acquired by the use of reason and the rejection of religious knowledge when it is acquired through either revelation or the teaching of any church. Paine articulated a moral challenge to the Bible. In The Age of Reason, he wrote, "My intention is to show that those books are spurious, and that Moses is not the author of them, and still further, that they were not written in the time of Moses, nor till several hundred years afterward, that they are no other than an attempted history of the life of Moses, and of the times in which he is said to have lived, and also of the times prior thereto, written by some very ignorant and stupid pretenders to authorship, several hundred years after the death of Moses." Paine describes the Old Testament as a history of wickedness and deplores the credulity of people brought up in habits of superstition, so that people in general know not how much wickedness there is in this pretended word of God. He cites the Old Testament book of Numbers, where Moses orders the slaughter of thousands of boys and women and sanctions the rape of thousands of girls at God's command. He doesn't spare ridicule for the claims of the New Testament either. The most extraordinary of all these things called miracles related in the New Testament is that of the devil flying away with Jesus Christ, carrying him to the top of a high mountain and to the top of the highest pinnacle of the temple, and showing him and promising him all the kingdoms of the world. How happened it that he did not discover America? Or is it only with kingdoms that his sooty highness has any interest? I might add, how happened it that he did not discover Neanderthals or penicillin either? Paine and his followers clearly saw the engagement of reason as essential to the project of a republic. The know-nothingism that evangelical conservatives embrace is, in that sense, anti American to the core. Barr is wrong that religion is a prerequisite for a free society. Paine is right. It is reason. The problems facing any polity must be studied, and facts, perspectives, and outcomes examined through debate. Morality is essential in these deliberations, but as this book attempts to point out, religion is not only unnecessary to morality, it may in fact be counterproductive. Where has the marriage of religion and greed, that is conservatism, got us? Paine had something to say about that a few hundred years ago. In the Age of Reason, he attacked religious institutions for their lust for power and wealth and the church's opposition to scientific investigation. He described the history of Christianity as one of corruption and oppression. The Christian theory is little else than the idolatry of the ancient mythologists, accommodated to the purpose of power and revenue. Ergo, climate change denial. Are we all to die as rich men grasp their dollars while the evangelicals wave their Bibles? In the words of teenage environmentalist Greta Thunberg, how dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was greed. It was pillage that sent the Europeans to these shores. It was greed that led them to kidnap and enslave people from Africa to work the land stolen from its murdered inhabitants. How does one create a land of freedom from this shameful, morally bankrupt legacy? It is not easy, and the fearful white evangelicals have fought those trying to make real the promise of equality and human rights every step of the way. Faye's article provided some historical insights on this, too. He wrote, in the antebellum South, evangelicals, according to some historians, made up close to 80% of the region's population. Southern evangelicals were caught up in a slave system that kept them in constant fear for their lives and the lives of their families. Slave rebellions against their white masters were relatively scarce, but when insurrections did take place, they brought paranoia and panic. One South Carolina widow claimed to lie in bed each night, fearing that at any moment one of her slaves would break into her house and hack her to death with an axe. The aggressive moral rhetoric and publishing campaigns of Northern opponents of slavery threatened the white Southern evangelical way of life and prompted fears of a race war. In response, some of the South's best evangelical minds went to work constructing a complex biblical and theological defense of slavery, Faye said. Ironically, the Black evangelical churches were instrumental in the struggle for freedom and equality. It's as if the Black churches took all that is good in Christian teaching and left the white evangelicals with the superstition and the bigotry that they've bestowed on their political party of choice, the GOP. William Barr dramatized this perfectly on June 1st, 2020, when he sent armed federal agents to violently disperse a peaceful demonstration against police murders of Black Americans taking place in Lafayette Square near the White House. Officers used tear gas and pepper balls, sting ball grenades, flash grenades, smoke canisters, rubber bullets, riot shields, and batons to disperse the crowd in violation of their First Amendment rights. An Australian television news team covering the protests were also gassed and beaten. The purpose of this was so that a dictator wannabe president could stride from the White House, flanked by subordinates, past uniformed officers standing at attention, to a nearby church where he posed for the cameras, holding up a Bible. The purpose of this widely condemned incident was to send a message to the GOP's white evangelical supporters. We will use the power of the state to impose your religion on the nation. One Bible to rule them all, one Bible to find them, one Bible to bring them all, and in its darkness bind them. Whoa, isn't that over the top, Lynn? I can imagine someone hearing this will think this. Is fascism darkness? Yes. Is lying and denial about a pandemic leading to hundreds of thousands of needless deaths darkness? Yes. Is the magical thinking that causes people to wait for a savior to come down from the sky instead of taking action to save the environment on which our lives depend darkness? Yes. Doc Rivers' ancestors might have been among the enslaved people whose hands literally created those majestic public buildings, where those white evangelicals sit in splendor, whining about their alleged religious persecution and un American history curriculum as they fatten their wallets. How pathetic that those who demand we stand rapt attention while the words home of the brave are sung are all about fear. Fear of wearing a mask to the grocery store to protect others from infection. Fear of a science class discussing the actual age of the earth. Fear of a person with dark skin. Fear of truth telling about our national sins most of all. I submit to you that patriotism is not proclaiming our country greatest. It is doing the work to make it live up to the ideal of liberty and justice for all. It is putting into policy the injunction to love one's neighbor as thyself. Those who aspire to live in the home of the brave must not lack the courage to face the truth about our history, that our nation was built on a series of grievous sins for which we must atone, not a God who does not exist, but to those who have loved and not been loved in return, by lifting up those who have been trampled and who are being trampled now. What I was taught in school was a version of American history, best described as propaganda and indoctrination. As I said, the purpose of indoctrination is to override compassion, such as the compassion a decent person would feel upon learning of all the people murdered and enslaved to create the United States of America. Here are the facts. I cannot describe them in any other way than with the word sins. 1. The Americas were discovered by the people we call Native Americans over 30,000 years ago. By the time Europeans arrived, tens of millions of people already lived here. The Europeans didn't discover anything. They invaded other nations, made war without just cause in order to despoil these nations of their lands for economic benefit. This type of activity is now classified as an international war crime. The least we can do is tell the truth about that. The descendants of those people so wrongly treated now live in some of the poorest communities in America. That we can do something about. 2. The justification put forward at the time for killing the Native Americans and taking their land was that they weren't Christians. Pope Alexander VI issued a papal bull or decree, Inter Caetera, in which he authorizes Spain and Portugal to colonize the Americas and its native peoples as subjects, to colonize, convert, and enslave. It also justifies the enslavement of Africans. England, too, had a history regarding the permissible enslavement of non-Christians. In Saxon England, slavery was legal. The Norman conquerors outlawed the enslavement of Christians in the 11th century. Everyone there was white, so skin color had nothing to do with it. 3. People from Africa were kidnapped and enslaved, brought to America to work the land taken by force from the Native Americans. They could not escape their enslavement by becoming Christians, though. Skin color was then brought in, and absurd claims made about it. in order to justify the continuation of slavery because it was profitable. Number 4, even after being formally free from slavery, the persecution of these people based on race has continued to this day, which is why people are marching in the streets and demanding that we all acknowledge that Black lives matter as much as others' lives. We can and must end this racism once and for all if we want to have any hope of being the land of the free. The legacy of this racism is that Black people have poorer living conditions on the whole, home ownership, health outcomes, injustice in the legal system. This is immoral. Those who wish to avoid societal responsibility make the argument that they never enslaved anyone, or even that their ancestors never enslaved anyone. To understand the moral bankruptcy of this argument, imagine this. A person is knocked down by a hit and run driver and is lying in the street. You don't do anything to help them. You walk on by because you weren't the one who ran them over. One of the most utterly ridiculous attacks made against Colin Kaepernick when he knelt to call attention to grave injustice was that he was insulting our troops and those who had served. This is backwards. Those men and women who have selflessly stepped forward to risk their lives for the rest of us are not dishonored by calls for justice. As far as I know, there has never been a perfect country. Our military does not defend our country because it is perfect. They defend it because it's home. Improving our home dishonors no one. It only makes it more worth defending. A person in the military must fight the wars our government sends them to fight. That doesn't mean the wars are right. We have leaders that have lied us into wars or sent our military into battle to defend this thing they call American interests. Those leaders may see corporate profit opportunities as equivalent to the national interest, but I don't. It is not a reason to put the lives of our service members on the line. We now live in a country whose political decisions are dominated by policies favoring the accumulation of wealth. It may make those who accumulate it happy, but it is making the rest of us increasingly miserable. The rhetoric is that those who accumulate wealth, have a right to it. But the statement ignores the way this wealth is actually built by people who work to build it and have little to show for it. It is built on stealing the hours of people's lives, hours they can never get back, lives that are finite, and once used up in this way, are over. Here was Thomas Paine's view on accumulations of wealth per the Thomas Paine National Historical Association. Was Paine in favor of a redistribution of wealth? Not only was he in favor of it, but the concept in modern times originates with him. Even in his early writings, he makes reference to it. But in Rights of Man and Agrarian Justice, it becomes a central tenet in his philosophy of government. Paine says that no one should live in a condition worse than that of life before civilization. Anyone who does, the poor, the infirm, the aged, the young starting out, must be compensated by the government for the loss of their natural right to the wealth of the land. He believed that wealth has been seized by the landlord and merchants' classes from the classes that produce it, mechanics and farmers. A progressive tax to redistribute that wealth was his solution. There you go, patriots. From the man whose writings lit the fire of the American Revolution. Would you like to have a society where it's easier to be happy? Or do you prefer to posture with assault rifles and hate Black people? The toxic cocktail of market extremism and fundamentalist religion is not only making us an unhappy nation, it is killing us. The domination of our politics by market extremism has made it impossible to address existential threats to our survival. Any call to take action on the environment is shouted down on the grounds that it hurts the economy. Religion has been the accomplice to this madness by promising believers a paradise after death, denying the scientific evidence, and now the evidence all around us that we are hurtling toward catastrophe. The rhetoric on the political right in response to this dire situation is moronic. They're going to take away your hamburgers. If the climate fails, there won't be buns either. Never mind the beef. The people who have accumulated wealth will likely to be able to buy a $600 hamburger if that's what they feel like eating. For those who can't afford that, praying for a hamburger won't help. As I write this, the West Coast is burning. No one has ever seen such fires, such heat. Guns and Bibles cannot save us. To hell with the stock market. Wake up. Be brave. Our home is in danger, and we are the enemy. We are also our only salvation.